Hey everybody, welcome to the 6x Summit 2021, day 2, our live Q&A. Super excited to be here. Another great day. We had, I think, more than 8 sessions today. Super informative. It was all about SaaS, enterprise apps, collaboration, and some just tremendous thinkers. And like we had heard from all of you out there last year, you wanted more live. So while the sessions that you heard all day were recorded in advance, this session is live and it's real time, and we've got some great guests here joining us today, and we're going to talk to them about what's going on in SaaS, what's going on in applications. And by the way, a theme that kind of came out today too, hybrid work, which I'm sure is going to come up quite a bit in this conversation as well. Pat Moorhead of More Insights and Strategy, Daniel Newman, Futurum Research. Pat, another day in the books, 3 more to go.
Oh, no, it's great. And we've had a couple 100,000 people come through the door, and it's been super exciting, super happy at the response. And yeah, you take a little bit of a risk when you go from 2 days to 5 days, 30 speakers to 50 speakers, but so far so good. But Daniel, we're almost only through day 2 here. But no, I'm really glad to have Nate from Oracle, Alyssa from Microsoft, and James from VMware. Everybody brings a different thing to the party, and whether it's enterprise applications, whether it's SaaS, and your companies are even part of collaboration, although that was not what you were looking at. I still think it was a fascinating day. But let's just jump right into this. So we've entered an era of the platform making applications and software more extensible and driving revenue expansion for application providers. So here's the question: how will the platform evolve from here? And maybe Alyssa, let's start with you on this. And by the way, you all don't have to answer if you don't want to. Jump in after, and we might go in, and Daniel and I are gonna go back and forth on this.
And Pat, real quickly, let's make sure we give them each just a quick moment to give an introduction of each and everyone. Nate, Alyssa, and James. Nate, why don't you just quickly, from Oracle, but give everybody just a quick background on your role so that everyone out there listening knows what it is you do.
Sure. Thanks, Daniel and Patrick, for having me. Great to see you. Glad to be here with Alyssa and James. My name is Nate Skinner. I lead marketing globally for Oracle's advertising and customer experience solutions. Everything marketing, sales, service, and commerce that is forward-facing, or what we call front office, in the applications from Oracle. That's what I am leading marketing for.
Alyssa?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Alyssa Taylor, I'm from Microsoft. I'm our corporate vice president, and I overlook 3 business units here at Microsoft. I run our data and AI business, our business applications, which is inclusive of Dynamics 365, similar to Nate, all of our front-end customer engagement, as well as our back-end operations, our Power Platform, and our global industry team.
And James?
Yeah, hi, I'm James Waters. I'm the CTO of our Modern Apps business unit at VMware.
Excellent. Should we dive in? Do you want me to take the platform question, or?
Yeah, absolutely, Alyssa. So what we'd asked you was, we'd entered the era of platform making applications and software more extensible and driving revenue expansion for app providers. How do you, Alyssa, see the platform expanding from here?
Yeah, and we'll, obviously there's all kinds of different entry points, and the term platform is pretty expansive. But when we talk about at Microsoft, when we look at sort of our offering, we look at it from a Microsoft Cloud standpoint. And I talked about this in my session around, how it all starts with data and how you do data aggregation, unification. And once you have that sort of data platform, the extensibility off of that data, James and I were just talking about this, whether you're building cloud native apps, whether you're using a low-code, no-code tooling environment like the Power Platform, being able to extend that data, create very unique experiences for an organization. And then I think the new thing that really has come into the market is at the enterprise SaaS application layer, how you can actually bring that data into your SaaS environment, and then also expand and extend off of that. I think the days of sort of the multi-year customization are done, and it's more about how you have overlays and you can extend that data, bring that data directly into your application layer, and then create those very unique complementary solutions, whether it be an application, whether it being able to analyze the data, and also very importantly, how you automate data and get rid of some of those legacy processes. So we really kind of think of it as a stack, starting with the base platform of, for us, it's Azure in our hyperscale cloud platform, the extensibility layer tooling that you have, and then the enterprise app layer.
Yeah, absolutely. James, as Pat said in his introduction, very profoundly, is that you guys all come from slightly different spaces, different backgrounds, and obviously different companies that are looking at the market differently. I need a different word. But I'd love to get that take from you guys in terms of, platform evolution. I know you're building a lot on Kubernetes, but kind of what's your whole thoughts around modernization and the extensibility of the platform?
Yeah, Daniel, that's a great question. I think VMware's in a really interesting position right now because Kubernetes is presenting this opportunity to present a more rationalized global compute fabric across every cloud. And, to apply that with, kind of the rigors of IT policy and security that VMware's always been known for, as well as the hardware fungibility that I think VMware's been known for. And I think that's pretty provocative value prop for our customers, and they're very interested in that. And then part of where I spend my time is like, okay, so what are you going to do with Kubernetes? Now you've got a Kubernetes. What's it for? And I think one of the killer use cases for Kubernetes is these API-first developer-friendly apps. Because if you actually crack open an enterprise and say like, hey, how do you actually find out that data about that customer when someone calls a call center? Sometimes it's pretty bad. And there hasn't been someone who's come through and said, let's build a developer-first interface to really empower the next generation of apps in these enterprises to make great experiences. So I think that 1-2 punch of a globally rationalized Kubernetes fabric, as well as the great API-first apps, is such an interesting opportunity for VMware to go after right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nate, from the Oracle perspective and the business you lead, in regular updates that we get from your team each quarter, we're hearing more and more about the expansion of the platform, extending and connecting the applications. Kind of how are you and how is your team at Oracle thinking about this particular area?
Yeah, I mean, we believe that the future of the platform, and I couldn't agree more with Alyssa and the way James described the challenge. When you say platform, it means different things to different people. So for us, they need to be flexible. You have to be able to, we've seen, if nothing else in the last year, that people want to go fast, and there's no shortage of need to expedite change and customer experiences quickly. And so the platform needs to be flexible. You need industry specificity. So we need the ability to deploy, update, control applications on the platform that are specific to industries. We're just getting to that level of sophistication now where people want to have software that works specifically for them and their unique use cases and workflows. And lastly, I would say AI has failed many companies who have tried to take advantage of it. That might be a little provocative, but it's hard, right? I mean, everybody throws around the word AI, and it's in every friggin' that you see, and it's everybody's SEO juice has got AI dribbled all through it. And the challenge is that it's kind of failed to deliver on the promise for a lot of companies, especially industry-specific examples and workflows, especially when you're trying to remain flexible. And so bringing data and AI, I couldn't agree more with Alyssa. Bringing data is at the core of this entire process. Bringing it together so that AI and the machine learning algorithms can work against data that is live and representative of your customers. It's important, and that should be critical in the context of a platform of the future.
Yeah, so Nate, I'm going to take your AI, I'm going to raise your stakes, I'm going to take it to hybrid work, right? That's the other thing we all have to be talking about. But I'm very suspect that we actually know what we're getting into. It was one thing when we were all equal squares or rectangles, and we were we were all remote. And now we're just going to kind of mix this whole thing up, and what comes out, I don't know exactly, but I would like to understand, and maybe we'll start with you, James. Is what do you see the impact that it's going to have on the software and even collaboration space, and maybe kind of extend the thought to enterprise apps, but also, VMware plays a big role in virtualization of many apps, regardless of where they are.
Yeah, if you take a step back, I think sort of the VMware perspective that software defined anything and that software can go where it's needed is really pretty important. So the idea that you can software define your end user computer experience and say, hey, let's apply policy within our end user computer experience and just turn that on with the zero trust network. I think that's in huge demand right now, kind of like that last mile. But I think equally the work we're doing to make sure that these developer and API workflows can work on any infrastructure, also important, because you start to get leverage out of this common workflow in a way where everyone can collaborate because they're using a shared set of tools. I think the opposite of that is like, hey, we've got a team for this server and this cloud and this over here and this over here. And now they're having to have a lot of high bandwidth conversations about how to even, support each other. So I think this idea of this globally accessible cloud fabric that VMware is standing up is more in demand than ever in that remote environment.
So Nate, when you look at your users and what they're looking for, I mean, are they giving you kind of different inputs on what they're looking for based on hybrid, or is it just way too early and they're still working in a remote world?
No, I mean, their hybrid is critically important. I mean, we're lucky to have partners like VMware that build on Oracle Cloud infrastructure, and the solution it works for them all. So I think it's critically important. It's funny. My take on that question is slightly different. It's about the human side of this question. We ran a survey of about 2,000 people, and the results were fascinating about this hybrid work environment. And I think maybe I'm being a little different in the interpretation of the question than hybrid cloud. I took it as hybrid remote versus in office. Does it matter where you live? Does it matter where you work? And the survey told us all kinds of interesting things. For instance, 86% of the people said their personality had fundamentally changed over the last year because we're all working from home. Like 70% of the respondents said they feel smarter. 40% of them felt more empathy and more conscientious towards their coworkers and their families. 38% were open to new experiences. All of that has an implication on work and what happens next, with our employees and our teams. And I think we all have to be taking that into account. You read in Forbes recently, there's the Great Resignation was, earlier this month. And then literally maybe 3 days earlier, 3 days later that's all overstated. Well, no, I don't know if anybody knows. But in the end, if we're not reacting and responding to employee empowerment, making sure every customer in our company can empower their customers to the best experience they possibly can, we're going to lose people. And that's my take on that question.
Yeah. So Alyssa, I mean, feel free to expand the response, because not only do you do enterprise apps, but you do productivity apps as well.
Yeah, and I think there's two things I would add onto that. I think, Pat, especially what you're saying, I think the world is convening where either the sort of silos or the walls between productivity and collaboration tools and business process have to break down in a hybrid workplace, because it's not about, if you are a salesperson, wandering down the hall to the customer service department. It's how do you have in-app experiences that allow you to collaborate and be able to bring in subject matter experts in a remote capacity. And so I think there's a very unique point in time where there used to be productivity or collaboration software that sat here, and there were business applications, and they sort of loosely interfaced. And now that sort of, deep native integration is something that organizations require. And I think it is not only for the benefit of the end user, but it also has, it has real productivity gains as well. Like there's an actual drain of productivity from context switching. And that's something that I think has always plagued us in the enterprise application business, right? When you have 15 different windows open. And again, kind of coming back to a different data model and a data repository for each one of those. So I think I think this has forced and accelerated this notion of bringing those collab apps and the business process world, closer together. And I'd also say with Nate, we had an LT meeting this morning around the human element of this. What does it mean when we're not all remote? And you have, and we had a very similar study, although Nate, you had some really interesting things around empathy that our study didn't bring to light. But, most people prefer a hybrid environment. As over 70% of who we surveyed had a very similar response to what Nate was talking about, is they don't want to go back full-time all the time in the office. And so then you're presented with this challenge of some people remote and some people in person, and how do you create an inclusive environment? And I think that's a real challenge for us going forward. I'll share the story I shared with our LT this morning. My son went back to school full time, and he got his vaccine and he wasn't feeling well. And he said, well, I'll remote in, because it was still an option. And at the end of the day, he came down and he was like, Mommy, that was terrible, because all of his friends were in class chatting and, doing the lessons, and he's on an owl camera and it's, moving around and he's trying to keep up. And so we have real work as leaders in the technology industry in front of us to not only think about it from a technology standpoint, but then also the human element of it as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting personal anecdote. I think all of us probably have a few from the pandemic times. I love that you guys each sort of interpreted that question a little bit differently, because it just goes to show the flavors. I tended to lean on the hybrid work, but let's face it, the hybrid cloud is an enabler of making that possible. So it kind of all, kind of ties together. I want to build on that question, Alyssa. I'm going to stay with you. And I'm taking a little liberty here of interpreting some of what the press, brought up. And, you started down this path, and it's perfect, but employee wellness. So we've become extremely astute at talking about what customers need. And we all talked about the transformation that's taken place, how we've digitalized our business to deliver what customers needed throughout the pandemic. But employees are the first customer. Apps and collaboration have helped, but you said 15 windows, and I think that's a light day. 15 windows is a light day. And I think, I'd like to just kind of get a little bit from each of you on this, but I know this has been a focus for Microsoft. I'd also like to hear how it's working for VMware and Oracle. But Alyssa, how are you guys taking this and applying it within your teams?
Yeah, I would, and I think we've all learned throughout this, but I think I'm going to continue to key off what Nate said around empathy. I think in a digital world, you have to stop and give space to be able to allow all voices to come in, to be mindful of things like when you start meetings and end meetings in ways that we never were before. And I think just making sure that people felt like they had moments to recharge. We talk a lot, particularly at my team, around recovery, recharge and recovery, and what are you doing? And we'll take meetings and go for walks and actually turn on cameras to show where we are, that it's not being, chained to your desk, all for 12 hours a day. And so it's just, it's been an interesting time in my career of just really being so much more thoughtful about, how we take into consideration where people are at, how we communicate, how we collaborate, and, how do we continue to foster well-being? And there's a bunch of tools, I won't bore the audience with, the technology side of it, but there's things that, Microsoft has invested in. There's a new product called Viva that's all around employee well-being, where you can chart, how many hours you've been in meetings. It can help you do suggestive type things around where you make space for learning, take time off. And I just think it's a way for us as leaders in the tech industry to be much more human centric and much more people centric, and be mindful of their well-being.
That's a good point. And James, I want to give you kind of a two choices of how you answer this. One is, I know you lead a team, so I'd love to maybe hear how you're doing this and handling this shift with your own employees. But the other thing is with the app dev process itself. Yeah. Are you bringing into mind this kind of hybrid work, the hybrid path of developing for a different workforce than the workforce that you might have been developing for 18 months ago?
I think the really interesting thing in my world is the expectations around speed have really gone up with the hybrid work environment. And if you think about it, Alyssa is making some really smart comments about avoiding burnout. Well, why are we avoiding burnout? Well, because it's actually so easy to schedule us now, right? Like if you think about the Zoom era, it's sort of like the Kubernetes for humans, right? Like it's been packing us very efficiently. Like my days have started at 7 a.m. every day. They go till Asia late. It's like the Kubernetes scheduler of human time. It's just packed it in tight. And so then, of course, we got to make sure we take care of our well-being. But I think the other thing that it really shows is that in that new velocity-oriented business environment, it really has put the pressure of 10 years of transformation on enterprises. And things that might have gotten put off before, like developer experience, like continuous delivery, like behaving as like a modern software company, are like front and center in, I had a CTO, CIO conversation this morning. That's where they're at. They're like, how do we give developers, the right experience to activate the data that we have, and then also to deliver the experience to our customer. So I think the speed orientation of leadership has just never been higher than in this very tightly bin-packed world. I don't know, Nate and Alyssa, if you're feeling that.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get it done.
Yeah, I don't think I've
Get it done.
I don't think, I know Pat and I have talked about this. I don't know if any of us have worked as many hours in our lives as we did packed into the last 18 months. It's been absolutely crazy. I miss time on airplanes. I laugh because that used to actually be sometimes like a decompressing time, because you kind of wouldn't be connected. You might take a nap or just listen to music or watch a show, and you just don't do it because you're booked solid every hour of the day. There's just that much to do. Nate, you mentioned some great data points when you talked about your study. So this might be a perfect moment. When you took that data, are you thinking about applying, how you apply that across your team and across the organization? Because I know you work, your team works pretty hard and you guys are putting in some serious hours.
Yeah, I mean, it's the insights are only valuable if we can take action from them, right? And so the benefit of understanding these things about people generally, everything that's been said, I couldn't agree more. The Kubernetes humanizing human, it's like so true. And then Alyssa's story around her son, or I don't know if you said son.
Yeah, it was my son.
I've seen that too. My son joined a new school. We moved. They had the option of being in person or remote. He chose remote. The teachers in the room, no offense to them, they're all doing their best, but they were biasing to the kids in the room. Well, we do that at work. If you get into being in the room means something different than the people that are remote. And that has nothing to do with the pandemic. That was like that before. As someone who has not always lived right where the corporate office is, I can tell you that there were opportunities that I missed out on because I wasn't in the room, and the bias was towards the people that were sitting there physically in the meeting, even though I could hear everything and participate. And so we had to do things, Daniel, to answer your question, take specific proactive action to remember our friends and colleagues that are not necessarily in the room if we want to make sure we take advantage of a hybrid work environment. Doing things like pausing every so often and saying, hey, Alyssa, did you have anything to add? Hey, James, did you have anything to add? Did anyone have any questions? And literally poking, pointing at the person on the screen, not just the people in the room. I think those are lessons we can take forward and make a better workplace for everyone. But you have to be proactive about it. You can't just assume it'll figure itself out. It won't.
Yeah, and I love that we've come full circle here when we started talking about, do we really know what we're getting into with hybrid? And it's good to hear from everybody that, okay, it doesn't sound like we think it's going to be easy. There are some elements of going hybrid that remote was actually easier. And as we get in here, we've all gotten used to kind of the equity of having the same square. But if we're hybrid and, there's the boss and the suck up to the boss in there, kind of getting that's not going to work. That's not going to work 2 or 3 days a week. So I am glad to see that we're all actively making changes, and particularly in the collaboration space, there are going to be some things that are going to come out in the next 6 months that I think are going to blow some people away. And when you tie that with enterprise applications, it really does become magic, because we can't just say, oh, that's the collaboration thing. Yet, my frontline worker application doesn't mimic that or tell them to, hey, take a breather or something. So we are now going to enter our speed round here. We hit up social media, we hit the press up to get feedback. And I'm going to start, Nate, with you. And so in the CX space, the move away from kind of third-party to first-party data, right? We've seen it with what Apple's done. We've seen some things that Google has done. We've seen some restrictions come in on data. Huge implications here to privacy and permissions. What are you recommending to enterprises in reaction to this? Yeah,
I mean, there's no mystery here, right? This is now a It's not the world moving to, it's the world is on the doorstep of or already in the consent-based kind of world, right? And brands need to think about the value exchange equation of moving to this consent-based world when it relates to customer retention, customer loyalty, keeping customers happy with their consent. We have to have them say, that's what I want. And so understanding the customers now, we need to do that even deeper than we ever have before, and know more about them with their consent than we did before if we intend to deliver a customer experience that changes the game for them. So this is all about first-party data, in essence, requiring us to fundamentally shift the relationship between a company and our customers. We have to get better at the first-party stuff because the third-party stuff's not available anymore.
That's a good, concise answer. It's on-ramps and off-ramps, and everybody's going to have to approach it a little bit differently. But I do think it's a definite challenge for companies that have long depended on easy and inexpensive access to third-party data. And now we really need a customer or a person or a prospect to say, I want to hear from you. And you guys, by the way, are a bunch of companies that are prolific at this. You're doing great because you know the risk and you don't want to get tangled up in it. But you have a lot of customers that have gotten used to it. We could spend a lot of time on this. We got to keep moving. My fault. I can't help myself.
Daniel, if I could add just one more little thing about that. We have it happen to us, right? All of us have probably gotten a solicitation email from somebody who's selling data. And 5 years ago, if I got a solicitation mail that said, hey, Nate, you want to buy a bunch of Microsoft customers? No offense, Alyssa. I might have said yes. Now I can't say, I know that that's just rife with nothing but compliance, death. And so I don't know what those people are going to do, because if you're out there selling lists of customer contact data to companies without their consent, your business is dead. And so even that kind of simple thing has changed dramatically in the last 24 months, and will continue to get even more rigid as we go forward.
Absolutely. Okay, I won't bridge that. I won't give you another chance. Alyssa, we're going to go to you. James, you're going to take us home. Alyssa, in your session, you talked about, I think the quote unquote was, it all starts with data. And it was longer than that, but long and short. Enterprises are no longer in the early innings. I remember writing a few years ago about, how to get involved in big data. Everybody knows now they need to play with data. Companies that are investing and utilizing data are being more productive. They're making more money. They're growing faster. All that proof is out there. But, it's the complexities growing a lot. And, you guys working with so many companies are probably hearing the wins, but you also are seeing the mistakes. So, our media, press, and we got feedback. A lot of people want to know, what kind of mistakes are you seeing out there, people making with their data investment? And what are you guys sort of recommending to companies to course correct?
I think there's three quick things that I'll say. One is building off of what Nate was just talking about in the first third-party dilemma, which is kind of the sort of ancillary point to that, which is companies that intermediate your data. So I think you're seeing organizations be much more mindful right now about where they outsource their data to, and being mindful of those that sort of mine and profit off of that data. And I think that's something, particularly in marketing and kind of the back end operations space, that is a real consideration for organizations. Is where they partner with their cloud providers around those that profit or intermediate their data. The second is this notion of AI. We touched on that earlier. I think the promise of AI, and I think Nate, you said this, it's failed many organizations. And so knowing how do you have that balance between tools and models that give you inherent AI in your data estate, and then where do you have implied intelligence, through your application layer. And, I think there's this world now where, there's more and more kind of out of the box models that you can apply on your data versus having to do custom AI models. Because I think we've all learned, I think everyone in the industry and customers, training AI models is no easy task, and requires a fairly large and comprehensive data set, which a lot of organizations don't have access to. And so it's really getting more and more kind of industry oriented AI models. Because I think it's a much faster, James talked about, agility and time to market, using those sort of applied AI models, I think is a much faster route for customers, and where they've failed in the past. And then the last point is just, not taking all of your data into consideration. If you look at the healthcare industry, 90% of the data in the healthcare industry is inaccessible. And so if you start taking decisions on a subset of data, you end up, I've seen organizations take some pretty critical errors because of that. And so really, when you can, being able to look at your data estate in its entirety. And I think this also goes to an industry trend that we're seeing, which is the front office and the back office really converging. And so when you're talking about your inventory and supply chain, how do you have those real-time updates into the hands of a frontline worker? You can't do that with disparate data sets. You have to look at your data set in its entirety and orchestrate those workflows in a way that is, really creates that sort of complete feedback loop across an organization.
So a couple observations. So first of all, some things, no matter how long you've been in the industry, don't change. Garbage in, garbage out. If you want good actions out of machine learning, you have to have a data strategy. And it was also great to see Alyssa and Nate shaking their head on connecting the front end and the back end. There's only a few companies out there that can even say they can do that without a bunch of messy APIs. And ETL and all that fun stuff. James, you're going to take us home here. I think some of the biggest input that we got was, hey, VMware with applications, kind of what's going on here. App development is actually your strategic runway here. Can you elaborate on why it starts with enterprise development and why that should be important to enterprises?
Yeah, Patrick, thanks. That's a great question. And I think for us, I listened to our CEO, Raghu. He really emphasizes starting with evaluating and understanding where the customer's apps are before we start selling infrastructure. And so I think we have some really core strengths in the sense that we can give your apps as they exist a cloud operating model on a lot of different pieces of hardware, be it Microsoft's cloud, be it Oracle's cloud, et cetera. We can take your current apps to cloud hardware, no problem. And I think that's a fundamental foundation that's not going away. But the next question is like, well, what about these innovation apps that you're going to build? As you start to think about cloud native technologies, then you've got to get to the developer, because the developer is the point of interface to the human. Like, we talked a lot about how this is about empathy and the modern work. Well, the reason we're iterating on applications and data so rapidly these days is because the human is a moving target. The human is a changing and evolving space. When we used to do the pure back office app, well, that was just something that Accenture laid out for us over an 18-month process, and we burned it into our mainframe. We ran it forever. But now we're in this world of the more human-centered API, the more human-centered application, and that work is never done. You're on an asymptote to delight, and you're always climbing it. And so the ability to iterate fast, these modern apps have to be fast iterating. So VMware and their modern infrastructure has to be more developer and human oriented. And that's why we start there. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. And I'm mentally doing the asymptote quote here. I'm going to tweet that. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, that was good. It immediately took me off anything you were saying. And I started seeing like some sort of meme being created when climbing to the light. Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. The way the world works right now.
I made that up as we're talking. I'm inspired by all of you.
Best kind of memes are the ones that are real, I love it.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Nate, Alyssa, James, you guys are tremendous. And I want to thank you very much for making the time late in the day to join us here on this 6.5 Summit live Q&A executive panel. All three of you had great insights, different perspectives, unique perspectives. No question, the future of work is shifting. Applications are going to completely change the way businesses are able to drive results. Data, modernization, continuous improvement, innovation, and development. These are all topics I was glad we were able to bring together. And thank you all. Hope you will all come back for our 2022 Summit.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Good to see everybody. Take care, Daniel, Patrick, Alyssa, and James.
Yeah.
For everyone out there, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow, day 3. It's going to get started with Honeywell CEO Darius Adamczyk kicking off the day. Great lineup, 5G Edge IoT, day 3, middle of the event, 3 more days to go. All these sessions were on demand, including this one. So if you're just tuning in and we're about to sign off, you'll be able to watch it in the stream later, and it's worthwhile. But for now, we got to go. For Pat, for myself, we'll see you later. Bye now.
Take care.